All righty, for everyone joining us, we're going to give it a minute, wait for everyone to log in. And if you're just joining us, we're going to start in just 1 minute. All righty, looks like participants are trickling in, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Chamber's 6th joint webinar of 8-part series with DeVry University. For those of you I have not met or do not know me, my name is Natalie Layton, and I have the pleasure of serving as the Chamber's VP of Membership. We have an excellent webinar today discussing how to time manage effectively. So with that, let's get on with some brief housekeeping before I introduce our presenter. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and will be distributed to our membership participants and available on our YouTube page as well. And throughout the webinar, please feel free to use the Q&A feature that should be found at the bottom of your screen. And our presenter, Laura Knapp, will answer questions as they're asked. And please participate in the chat box as well if you have any questions or comments throughout the webinar. You can also use the raise hand feature that's located on the icon bar at the bottom of your screen as well if you'd like to talk and ask a question verbally. And if you want to know more information about membership to the Chamber, just send me a quick note in the chat box and I will be happy to follow up. Now I have the pleasure of introducing today's presenter, Laura Knapp. Laura is the Center Dean at DeVry University and its Keller Graduate School of Management in Long Beach, joining the school at the end of 2016. She's a Southern California native and longtime Long Beach resident, having lived in the Bixby Knolls and California Heights neighborhoods in Long Beach over the past 20 years. She earned her Bachelor's of Arts at Cal State Long Beach and MBA at USC's Marshall School. She's a member of the Long Beach Rotary, the LB Chamber, Toastmasters, and is the current chair of the South Coast Higher Education Council. She's passionate about education, which helps equip graduates to make a difference in fast-growing sectors of the economy. And I feel like I'm going to memorize that bio of yours, Laura, by the time that the series is over. But we're so happy to have Laura here with us again. And I'm going to hand it over to you.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much, Natalie. I appreciate that. And thank you to the Chamber for, co-hosting this series of webinars. And, that's part of what I do in the community is just going out and providing some, professional development, career development topics for those that are interested. So thank you so much for joining today. We're going to talk about time management today, and I'm going to start off with a question. And that question is, what would you do? I want us to start thinking about this. What would you do with an extra 10 hours per week, right? If I were to just hand you on a silver platter, the week has gotten longer, the day has gotten longer, you have 2 extra hours per day to do whatever you please. What would you do with that time? Okay, feel free to chat that in the chat, share with us. I love seeing the chats, come through, and I think it's helpful for all of us who've logged in today to hear from each other. I don't want this to be kind of a one-to-many presentation. Let's let this be a discussion, right, about best practices in terms of time management. And the reason I ask the 10 hours is because research shows that actually about 2.1 hours are sort of wasted, I'll say, due to distractions and just a lack of time management, a lack of really proactively managing and kind of taking control and planning our days. 2 hours can just go poof, on average. So that's about a quarter of our work week. And that's a lot of time, especially considering time really is, I think, the most important commodity. We talk about time and we talk about money, 2 very important ingredients, right, to achieve what we want to achieve. And, time you don't get back, whereas money you can, as long as you have time, you can hopefully continue to make money and earn and create revenues and things like that. But time we don't get back. So it really is, I would say, our most important commodity. So today we're going to talk about, okay, yeah, and I love to see, take a break and relax. Exactly. Work out, read, spend time with friends. Exactly. Get that quality back into our lives that some people are saying, and depending on the research you're reading right now, I've seen articles saying that we're working anywhere between 45 more minutes, almost an hour, to 3 hours more per day just because of COVID times and everybody working from home and everything like that. So almost an hour to even up to 3 hours per day more working. And I think even before the pandemic, right, we were tasked with doing more with less, wearing more hats. People always talked about that. That's not a new thing. It has gotten exacerbated because of the work from home. I'm not exactly sure, but I think we can all agree that we feel like we're working more, and maybe that quality, which has always been difficult, right, and a challenge to get, is maybe even more so. So today we're going to talk about just a couple of strategies as well as tactics. I have a ton of different ideas. Grab a piece of paper, pen, jot down what resonates with you. I actually do have an exercise in a minute where we're going to jot down some of our to-dos and create a quick to-do list, and we're going to prioritize those tasks in a way that's highly, highly focused. So we're going to talk about multitasking, how to maximize your time if and when you have to multitask, right? How many of you are multitaskers? Probably all of us. And we hear sometimes, well, it's not worth it. It's really wasting your time. But there are times actually that you can be a multitasker and make the most of it. We're going to talk about prioritizing our goals and just making sure that we're really using a keen filter to make sure that we're working on what is important. I'll talk very briefly about digital tools. I think we all have probably a lot of digital tools in our back pocket, things that we have on our smartphone or PC that we use to cut down on the distractions. And I will bring up some of those and ask for you to share your ideas as well with us. So, well, yeah, what are our time bandits? Okay, aside from just, feeling like there's an increased workload per se, what are the time bandits? I talked about, kind of that poor time management, or, kind of forgetting to really, make a plan and work that plan. What are the things that you do find tend to fritter away your day? And I'll just throw that question out again to the audience. Please use chat. Don't be shy, right? No shame. We all have time bandits. Sometimes I'll just look up for my work and I'm like, what just happened with the last 2 hours? What am I working on? And it definitely, I feel very busy all the time. And I always feel like I'm working on important things. But then at the same time, I look back and it's hard to account for it to a certain extent. So yeah, emails for sure. People coming into your office for no real, yep, exactly. Impromptu meetings, we'll call them. And I think, it's nice to balance that human connection and, have that where, and if possible, if we are back at the office, that's really important to like building bonds, building community, building relationships. At the same time, we have to be cognizant, of the time that goes into that bonding, right? Emails, most definitely. Too many meetings. Sometimes I think we've gotten into the habit of having these recurring meetings that are on our calendars. And it's like, oh my gosh, if they're not really serving a purpose, if there's not an action item coming out of them, if you feel like you're not contributing or members of the team are not contributing to that meeting, it's probably time to consider whether that meeting should continue to be held at that cadence, right? Let's relook at all of our standing meetings and consider them in terms of time. And there's some really well-known CEOs out there like Elon Musk. If you Google him, he'll talk about, he absolutely abhors, having meaningless meetings or too many meetings. He says the work has to get done outside of those meetings. So let's keep them to a minimum. That's something. Another thing that takes time, I don't know if you've noticed this, but shifting between very disparate tasks. And this is something that happens when you're multitasking. So if you have very different types of tasks, for example, maybe quiet work where yes, you are emailing, you're responding to emails, you're having to comprehend what people are, kind of sending you and asking you. And then maybe you have a time where you're calling people and reaching out and having conversations. And maybe there's a third, type of work that's also very different. Maybe it's something financial. You're looking at spreadsheets, you're looking at numbers. The more often we shift between different tasks, actually the longer it takes for that shift. Sometimes people, social media, they say, oh my gosh, I just started checking the news and I just got wrapped into it. And, an hour, 45 minutes gone, and I could have been working on a certain project. So lots of time bandits, out there. Multitasking. Let's talk about multitasking. It looks like Amanda is definitely a multitasker. Thank you for admitting that. I think we all, as I mentioned, have to be in this day and age, right? That said, in a recent study by David Meyer at the University of Michigan, he was able to show that switching what you're doing from one task to another mid-task actually lengthens the amount of time that you take to complete both tasks by 25%. Okay, so it does, if you're switching mid-task too many times, you are actually slowing down the whole process. And this can have an impact ultimately on your deadlines, on getting things done in time. And I know we're all very responsible people. We're like, okay, we're going to make our deadline no matter what, but then what suffers? Maybe that balance time, that time spent with family and friends. So we do want to be cognizant of the things that we may be doing inadvertently that are slowing us down a little bit. Okay. That said, are there times that it's okay to multitask? Absolutely. Absolutely. But I have 5 tips, or 4 tips actually, on when it's okay to multitask and how to multitask. Okay. Actually, that's the next slide, and it is 5 tasks. Okay, or 5 tips. So the first tip when you find yourself having to tend to a lot of things at once is to give your full attention to the task in front of you. Okay, so that can be challenging because we have 3 or 4 different things going on around us, right? We want to be able to hone in 100% on the one thing that we're doing in this moment. Does that make sense? Okay, so kind of put the blinders on and just focus your time on that one task that you're doing in the moment. And there's something called the Pomodoro technique. Has anybody heard of it? Feel free to chat, Pomodoro. So this is something that I sometimes employ if I have a lot of things on my list to do. Pomodoro is give it 20, whatever you're doing, give it 25 minutes, right? And the idea behind Pomodoro is that our attention span tends to break at about that 25-minute time frame. So if you can just sit yourself down for 25 minutes and go full bore and then take a 5-minute break, okay? Take a 5-minute break, refresh yourself, get a glass of water, your coffee, what have you, walk around, chat with your colleagues. But if you can focus for 25 minutes at a time, right? And even some people put their timers out, their egg timers, or, put a stopwatch on your phone, time it, because we know that time, it slips away, and then maybe we're working too long a task and we get exhausted. Keep it at 25 minutes. Give it a shot. I would love to hear your feedback, okay, on how this works for you, or if anybody has used this technique or trick in the past. Definitely too, set specific time frames. There's nothing like a deadline. I always say that. As long as there's a deadline, I'm going to make it happen. It's easier when that deadline is external, right? I know I have to make that happen. I know I have to be somewhere at a certain time. We need to set deadlines for ourselves and get used to following those deadlines. Switching gears, right? Switching between tasks. What you want to do here is schedule your tasks in a way that like tasks are sort of clumped together. Does that make sense? So if you're doing a lot of financial work, working with numbers, right, and you have a couple of different tasks in that area, put that all together as much as you can in the day. Okay. And if you're doing a lot of very quiet work, maybe writing, reading comprehension, you need to close your door, you need quiet time, and maybe it's emails, maybe you're writing a proposal, do that at a certain time. Clump or aggregate those tasks together, okay? That way, as you change tasks among them, you have less downtime, okay? Because your thought process is not still invested in the prior task. It's kind of, just keeps moving on, if that makes sense. Okay, so become effective at switching gears. We all know, right? We're always to prioritize the high payoff and low priority tasks. We know what the 2 or 3 important things that you have to get done, in a certain day are, right? We know this, but yet we fall into different habits where we start getting distracted, and the newest thing that comes to us is what we want to work on. Oh my gosh, let me jump on that. I'll jump on that right now. We get the sense of urgency, and it's really easy to get in this procrastination mode because, smaller, possibly easier tasks are getting thrown at us at kind of a rapid rate. And it's almost possibly easier to complete those than really digging into that high payoff project that may not be a quick project to complete. It may be something that you have to invest time and brain, energy, power into a couple of days each, or a couple of hours each day, a couple of days each week until you see that payoff. Yet, if you don't invest that time, it's painful at the end when that deadline, is abounding. Okay, so prioritize the high payoff and the low priority tasks. Really understanding when you're most efficient in the day is going to be very important here. Okay, so high payoff, as I said, sometimes those are the more challenging, tasks, things that we really have to put our brain power and our energy and our talent into, right? So if you are more efficient in the morning, make sure that you're attacking those things in the morning. If you are more efficient in the afternoon, evening, or late at night, some people are night owls, right? Work on those projects at night. Okay. It's very common sense, but again, sometimes people forget or they get distracted. Calendaring. How many of you use your calendar to put both, business, work, professional, and personal things on? I guess, what are your thoughts there? How many of you are kind of calendar freaks, I guess I'll say. How many? Because I know I am, and I've definitely gotten used to, yes, absolutely, leveraging a calendar, definitely for work. What I have got, and at first I was a little bit like, do I want to put personal stuff on it, doctor's appointments? And now I absolutely do. We use Outlook. So I'll just, if I'm not exactly sure, I'll still put it on my calendar and I'll just mark it as private, so that if anybody is checking my calendar, they don't need to, they don't need to see that I'm taking my daughter to the orthodontist or what have you. Yet they do see that I'm booked. So they're not going to try to book me into some meeting, okay, that I can't, do. I can't balance. Okay. You can also, if you could say, well, you know what, I'm, I am dropping somebody off at an appointment, but I will be available, so I don't want to look booked during that hour. Does that make sense? You can mark that calendar event as free so that it still shows up to you and reminds you, so that you know how to prioritize your time and organize your time. But anybody looking at your calendar from outside can see that you're free. Okay. So there's two ways you can do it. Do you want to look busy or do you want to look free? You can mark that, at least using Outlook. I know that you can. Okay. But bottom line being, I would highly recommend, if you aren't already, using your calendar for as much as you possibly can. Okay. Commute time. I don't know, gosh, any personal time. If you want to schedule in balance time, right? Fitness, time for fitness, time to reach out to a family member, what have you, whether that's during your workday or even outside of your workday, I think it should be on your calendar, right? We all have our phone, we still get those pop-ups and those alerts. If you have something going on the weekend or in the evening that you definitely don't want to miss, I would put it on your calendar. And the mental payoff is that when it's on your calendar, it eases your mind a little bit. Okay, so it takes away that clutter from your brain, because you're going to get the alert, it's there, you're going to see it each time you log into your calendar or onto your phone. And it sort of takes away, again, that confusion. Am I missing something? Oh my gosh, right? And allows you to work a little bit more efficiently, a little faster. So these are the 5 tips to maximize your time when you do find yourself multitasking, which I think is pretty much all of us at this point. Okay. So another question for you. How do you prioritize your tasks? We talked about high payoff versus low priority. Anybody on the call, feel free to chat it, share with us. I would love to hear. It's not a trick question. I would love to hear, how do you all prioritize your tasks? While you're thinking, I'll just share, I think I'm typical. I just write down my tasks, every day. Now, I'm a morning person. Okay, I'm a morning person. The recommendation is, if you are a morning person, you should be writing down your tasks the night before, the evening before, so that as soon as you're up, and in work mode in the morning, you can dig right in without having to think, okay, what am I working, So I make that task list the night before or the morning of, Same for the weekends, and then I prioritize them numerically, right? Pretty much. Is that what everybody does? Similar? Okay. So yeah, goals for the day. Yeah, maybe highlight and make sure what are the one or two things that I have, must do's that I have to do today, no matter what. So, and I would say absolutely having your goals for the day, having a list that you manage, numbering it, numerically, making sure that list is not too long, right? If we jot down 30 things, chances are you're not going to get to them, so maybe what are the 6 or 7 top things? And then, rank them in order of priority. Okay. So right now, I'd like us all to grab a sheet of paper if you have one handy, or even make a note on your phone. You can use notes or whatever, jot down on your PC. What are your tasks? And these could be a mix of things that you have to do professional wise, for work, for extracurricular, right, personal life. What are 5 to 7 things that are kind of on your mind right now that you have to get done today, this week, in the near future? Let's go ahead and take a couple of minutes to jot those down. Okay. And keep that handy as we're going to use it over the next few minutes. Okay. Does everybody have their task down? Okay. And I'm going to talk about decision criteria. Okay. And this is very key in time management. We talked about frittering away our time or losing it, on distractions and maybe not managing our time well. It's very easy for our time to get eaten up by things that seem very urgent. I'm also going to go over the urgent important matrix in a minute by Stephen Covey. But I think even before, we go to that, it's very important to unpack each task and understand really truly what the scope is. And we want to keep in mind kind of, is there an opportunity to delegate this task, right? Is there an opportunity for other people to help me to work on this task or on this goal, right? And who are those stakeholders? And how can I leverage my team? There's like an ancient African saying that if you want to go fast, go alone. Yet if you want to go far, you need people around you. You need a team, right? You need a team. And I want us to think about our team, whether it's, our coworkers, our managers, the people that we manage, the people within our own families, our loved ones. Let's think of our own goals as, potentially things that we can get help on. Okay. And I know I'm guilty of this. I have this task list and it's 100% Laura. Okay. I score high on the responsibility attribute on the Clifton Strengths Finder. We did that on our first webinar, Clifton Strengths. And I'm like this highly responsible person. Okay. And I think every attribute has a positive. It also has a negative on the flip side. And with me, and if any of you are those, highly responsible people, you tend to take on even more that should be under your purview. You might even be taking on things that other people should be taking on, right? Right, that you should definitely be delegating. Okay. And it's because we want everything to be done right and well and, on time and under budget, and we know best. And it actually can get in your way, right, of getting things accomplished in a really positive way and going farther, right? And yes, if there's anybody who would like to speak, we can actually give you that permission to speak. Otherwise, feel free to continue to share in the chat. Would love to hear from you. So tackling tasks, managing up, delegating. What does this all mean?
Laura,
Okay.
I have a comment.
Yes.
Steve Soto.
Oh, hey, Steve. Yeah, go right ahead.
When I was a manager for city, I was the economic development manager for a few cities. The best way I was able to utilize my time and task was I had a wonderful assistant. And if you have an assistant who's you can rely on and who's very intelligent, I would give her half of my task, and she would perform it, and that way I would be able to do twice as many things than I did before if I just try to do them on my own. So
Yeah.
reliable assistant is so important.
Oh my gosh, it's so key. Somebody that you can trust. And I would say that whether we have an assistant or not, right? We have to find those reliable people around us on our team, and it's not, if they don't report to us, sometimes that's, oh my gosh, how do we go about this? But it is about a delegation, right? The art of delegation and knowing the people that you can trust. Like you said, Steve, you trusted this person. She was very highly intelligent. She was very capable. I would ask you all, who are those members on your team? They may or may not be your assistant per se, right? But who are the people that you trust that are up to the task and that, have expertise even, that could probably complete the task better than you could, potentially. So yeah, it is teamwork, and it is finding and knowing, right, who on your team is really good and who can help you. If you have an assistant, all the better, right? I know many of us don't, and we are tasked with sort of a lot of things that we need to get done, wearing those multiple hats, like I mentioned. So, but it is, yeah, as you have a task list, understand what you absolutely have to do. What are your responsibilities? Where do you add value? And you'll know that by understanding the full scope of work. And instead of looking at each task as like, okay, let me just cross this off, understand that full scope of work. What needs to get done to make sure that that bigger task is done? And can anybody around me help me with that? Okay, who are the key stakeholders? What are the timeframes, and what are the in-between milestones, right? What are the milestones that need to be hit? So I think once you know, and this is obviously for bigger tasks, that we find in our professional world, understanding, almost treating it like a mini project by understanding the scope, who are the stakeholders, what my own responsibilities are, and what the time frame is, allows us to back up a little bit and assign us and assign other people subcategories of that task to make sure that they get done, on time and in a really good way. Delegation. So Steve was talking about delegating, giving 50% of what he had on his list to his very capable assistant and just getting it done and being able to run so much faster. And there's an art to this. And again, if you don't have an assistant, then there's definitely, you'll have to kind of just look at ways that you can involve your team. And maybe that team is your higher up. Maybe it's your manager. Maybe you've been assigned something and you can give part of that back. But really enlisting the people around us, right, to help with various aspects, it prevents that burnout, right? It prevents you having to do everything and kind of burning out and potentially missing deadlines. And certainly you have that balance that you want to have in your life. So who are the people around us, that can help us go faster per se? And I'm the type, I always say, gosh, it's hard to delegate. If you want something done right, you have to do it yourself. Okay. I don't know. Is anybody else like that? I have to do it myself. It's just too hard. It takes too long, and I fall into that trap, right? Of, yeah, definitely doing it all myself, spending a lot of time that's taking away from my own balance time, right? My family time potentially. So how do I get around that? How do these highly responsible people get around that? And there's a way. You can ask yourself, should this be delegated? Sometimes you shouldn't delegate something. Maybe the time frame, the turnaround is too fast. Okay, so depending on what the timeline is, you may or may not want to delegate. Don't be silly and delegate something that is going to take a long time to explain, and you're going to have to give it instructions. And by that time, the deadline is already there. Does that make sense? So be realistic in what you delegate. And I'm sure, Steve, you were very realistic in what you delegated. You knew exactly what had to be communicated. Do you have enough time? Can the task be assigned with clear instruction? Okay. Are you willing and able to give that very clear instruction? Or are you going to end up setting yourself up for disappointment because you're throwing things to people to take on without giving them that guidance that they need, right? Also, consider, what's the experience level and the skills of the individual that you're considering delegating to? Are they up for the task, right? Steve, in his case, had a very capable and intelligent person he was working with. You want to make sure, some people are good at some things are good at, other things you almost want to have a customized approach as you delegate things out. Okay, if that makes sense. So definitely before you delegate, take a look at these criteria so that you're not ending up, kind of setting yourself up for disappointment and even longer turnaround times. Okay. I'm going to talk about, so that's really unpacking. I wanted to talk about, let's dig deeper into the tasks that we do have on our plate in a way that, and maybe that takes more time up front, but it saves us time in the long run. Okay. The other very important thing, and I know you're all, I guess, how many people are fans of Stephen Covey and the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People? Anyone read the book? Everyone, right? Yeah, feel free to chat. So in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, right? Business bestseller. I think this book has withstood the test of time. If you haven't read it, I would highly recommend getting your hands on it and just even browsing through it. In this business classic, Stephen Covey actually popularized, he didn't invent, but he popularized the concept of the urgent, important matrix, which had been used by former US President Dwight Eisenhower to organize his tasks. Okay, so Covey actually rediscovered it and made it relevant to career aspirations and work-life balance. And he very much popularized it in his book. Okay, and it's very important when it comes to time management, being able to distinguish between these two things is very, very key, because literally we can waste years, we can waste lifetimes working on what's urgent, right? The urgent thing of the day, and not necessarily tackling the things that are important to us in our careers and in our personal lives as well. Okay, so these are two different things. Sometimes they coincide. So we're going to go through this this matrix. Does everybody have their 5 to 7 tasks that we talked about? If so, I'd like you to take out a piece of paper. Hopefully you have that out already, and draw sort of a cross between it. We're going to draw a quadrant. So a square with a cross in between it. So there are 4 squares. Okay, hopefully you have something to write with. Let me show you what urgent and important can look like. Okay. All right, and would love to hear if any of you, are already leveraging, right, the urgent important. I have a colleague that literally, she can tell you on a daily basis what she's working on and where it falls within the quadrant on a daily basis. Like, she has adopted this so much and taken it to heart, and she's one of our very, kind of high performing, very successful colleagues. So on the left of the quadrant, right, this is the matrix. We have urgent, important. These are crisis issues, pressing problems, deadline-driven projects, meetings, and presentations. Things that actually are important and do need to get done, pretty much now. Okay. 2 is basically the very important things that need to get done. They may not have as urgent of a timeline. This includes balance with family, relationship building, true recreation, empowerment, investing in ourselves, right? Taking the time for continuing education, getting really clear on our values, preventing issues, right? Making sure everything's in line for, I don't know, our taxes or what have you, business planning, preparing for the future. Bottom left is 3. Okay, these things are urgent. They're not important to us. They may be important to other people. So these are the things, when a colleague calls you and says, oh my gosh, I need your help. And of course, I'm a very helpful, I want to help everyone. I want, to help everyone. But in a way, we got to really be cognizant, right, of these interruptions. And there's certain strategies that I'll let you know about to make sure that we're minimizing the time that we spend in this quadrant. And then 4 is just basically trivial kind of leisure work, fun things that sometimes we do, but this should be outside of our work hours and definitely after 1, 2, and 3. Tasks within 1, 2, and 3 have been completed, if that makes sense. Okay, so let's dig in a little bit more. I'd like you actually to take your list of items, your 5 to 7 items, and put them where you think that they go in this quadrant, okay? So let's dig in a little bit here. Quadrant 1. These duties, right, do need to be done now. Like it or not, they are both urgent. There is a very tight deadline, and they are important to your career, to your health, to your personal life, right? These are the big things that need to get done. You absolutely have to jump in here and make sure, these items are done. Now, the thing is, how many of you have items, right, in this quadrant? All of you? Most of you? Some of you? Okay. I'm sure all of us do, right? We all have deadlines. The thing is, if all of your tasks, all of your things are in this quadrant, right, you don't necessarily want to be living here, because what that leads to or can lead to is stress, right? Feelings of burnout, feeling out of control, right? You don't have control over your day because you're constantly putting out fires, okay? So if you find that most of your tasks meet the criteria of urgent and important, those may tend to be your outcomes, which is not good, right? If we're living in this quadrant, it's not necessarily a good thing. Obviously, we have deadlines that we need to complete, but not everything should be here. And if they are, it may be because items from quadrant 2 are slipping into this quadrant because we're not working in quadrant 2, if that makes sense. Whoops. Okay. Quadrant 2 is located in the upper right corner. These are success-oriented tasks that are critical to achieving goals. So as soon as you're done with your quadrant 1, go to quadrant 2. Pay attention to this quadrant so that items here don't slip into quadrant 1, because you haven't paid attention, to getting some of these things done. All of a sudden, they're very urgent. It happens quite often. Things that are important to us, we put off because there's no outside deadline pushing us. Okay, so we tend to let it, kind of fall by the wayside until it's too late or almost too late to have a really good impact on that goal. Does that make sense? Okay. Investing in relationships is very key, right? Remembering to do that during COVID times, I think, is important, especially if we have colleagues that we don't see a lot. Figuring out a way to connect with colleagues if we are working remotely and they're working remotely, right? And we're all doing our Zoom meetings and our Teams meetings and our virtual meetings, and yet we're not connecting on a personal level. Okay, preparing for the future, preventing issues, again, investing in ourselves. These are all the very important things that don't necessarily have a deadline until they do. Okay, so very, very important to spend time in quadrant 2. Now, if most of your tasks, lucky you, if most of your tasks are here in this quadrant, guess what your outcomes are going to tend to be? Long-term perspective, growth, a feeling of good balance, control, and fewer fires that you're putting out. So literally, if most of your items are here, I congratulate you. You have a very good, sense of time management, and your goals are clear to you, and they're here, and you're working on them. If most things are here and you're working here throughout the day, definitely kudos to you, and I commend you. If you're not, or if you don't have anything in this quadrant, I urge you to think a little bit more about your long-term objectives and goals and what really matters to you as a person, right? If we're not clear on that, that's kind of the first step, right? We have to know what our most important goals and priorities are, right? In order to be able to spend our time efficiently. Okay, quadrant number 3 is lower left. Okay, this is a quadrant that many people fall into. And if I'm not paying attention, I, can fall victim actually to being here as well. Okay, why? Because there's that sense of urgency. Oh my gosh, my colleague needs help, a student needs help, family member needs help, interruptions, impromptu meetings, Phone calls. Oh my gosh, you get on the phone with somebody and all of a sudden it's an hour and a half phone call when you had thought it would be more like maybe a 10, 15-minute conversation. Last minute reports. Again, usually the priority and the sense of urgency is being given to you from somebody else. Okay. Yet these items are not important for your long-term achievement. Does that make sense? Okay. So what do we do? What can we do if we find ourselves living, in this quadrant quite a bit? I would recommend, definitely minimizing as much as possible the time spent here. I'm not saying you're going to ignore it, right? Certain things have to be done. There's something called the Ohio technique. Has anybody heard of it? Only handle it once. Okay, if you're getting a lot of emails that, again, are not really related to your goals and objectives, your long-term, plans, only handle it once means those emails should be tossed, deleted, transferred to somebody else. You can flag them to follow up on them later. You can tend to them if you have to in the moment, right? But you don't want to handle those tasks repeatedly or over and over, right? You want to do something with those emails or with those assignments. Like I said, delegate them out, send it to somebody else, work on it in the moment very quickly, flag it for future activity, right? Store it into your archive, into your email archive. Do something with it, but only once, okay? We don't want to live in this quadrant at all, because this is where we feel very busy and we can feel very, very successful in a way. Oh my gosh, I had such a busy day. It was a crazy day. I worked that 45 minutes more or 3 hours more this day. What was I doing? I was tending to these very urgent but not important interruptions. Okay, so very important to, as much as you possibly can, be efficient here. Delegate, reject, can we say no? Sometimes it is appropriate to say no. Or guess what? That's not me. You need to go to so-and-so to get this done, right? Cut these tasks as short as you possibly can. Do them, right? I'm not saying, not do what you need to do, but be very efficient with your time in this area. Okay. The fourth quadrant is just that, not urgent, not important, trivial, busy work that really, there's not a deadline. It's very minutia based, but you're digging into the details. And do we need to be digging into the details, right? Is it necessary for the overall quality of the project, right? Sometimes we can overthink things and we have to step back and say, gosh, this is actually not, a must-have criteria for this project to be done. Let me step back. Does this actually need to be done? Some phone calls, some meetings, some, escape activities like television, social media, irrelevant emails, kind of junk emails. These are truly, at the end of the day, there's zero ROI for these items. Okay, so I would want you to definitely not live here at all and reconsider again, take a look, unpack these tasks. Is there a deadline? Is there a sense of urgency for, around them? If not, do not live here. If things definitely need to get done at some point, fine, go ahead. But I would say that if we're living in this quadrant, if we're spending a lot of time here, the outcome is we're not getting ahead on anything, right? We're not completing our tasks. We're not completing our goals. If we're spending too much time in the weeds or sort of wasting time. So if you have any items in this category, I would say, wow, only address them maybe after everything else is done, 1, 2, and 3. Okay, if you do find some things falling into this quadrant. Okay, a good way to think of this quadrant, just kind of wrapping it up a little bit as we get towards the end, is quadrant number 1, you definitely need to take care of, right? You need to take care of these items, okay? Quadrant number 2 is where you want to live. Okay, quadrant number 2 is actually where you want to spend most of your time and effort and brain power, right? Here is where you want to live. Even if there's not a deadline, again, we have to apply our own deadlines to some of these items here. Relationship building. When will I build up that relationship with some of my colleagues that I haven't seen in almost a year? Okay, it's not going to happen unless we calendar it. So I would go back to the calendar and put those things on the calendar. And again, these are the items that are going to allow us to accomplish more and avoid that sense of burnout that I know a lot of people are experiencing right now because of the more hours, because of COVID, because a little bit of cabin fever, because of all of the above, right? So I think now, even more than before, making sure that you're making time in quadrant 2 is very, very key. Okay, live in that quadrant. Deal with quadrant 3 as efficiently and as intelligently as you possibly can. Here's where you're definitely delegating things out and really applying your critical thinking to, are these tasks for me or should they be somebody else's, task? And then quadrant 4 is really kind of vacation time, after 1, 2, and 3 have been worked on, if that makes sense. But this quadrant is a very effective way, I think, to just start seeing things in a new light, so that you can determine what is truly important, and, but not urgent, and then focus in on that area. Okay. I'm going to switch gears a little bit. Any questions as we go on the quadrant, on the urgent, important matrix? Stephen Covey. Any questions from the audience? Feel free. Yes. Okay. So moving right along, and we talked about our distractors, distractions at work, impromptu meetings and, email. I want to talk about, again, the calendar and some app hacks, we call them. DeVry, we really value technology. We have so many students, have created apps and, many other things in the digital world. And I just want to talk about leveraging technology for the better, right? To add more value to our lives and allow us, again, to live in that quadrant number 2. First and foremost, and I talked about this in the beginning, is your calendar, your digital calendar. And, getting everything on it. Maybe you have 2 calendars, maybe you do one that's personal and one that's work related, and you can have those merge on your smartphone. So at least where you're supposed to be at any given time. But absolutely being able to access your calendar from anywhere you are, makes it really hard to lose track of what you should be working on at, any given moment. So using an online calendar, just I think makes people in general more efficient. Is there anybody still using paper calendars? I know I have a friend, she's like, nope, I have my calendars in my purse. I know exactly where I should be at any given time, right? Yes, and some people use both, jotting down things. I'm actually fully digital at this point because it's just so easy to reference the phone if I'm in my car, what have you. Although I'll carry around lists, so I guess, yeah, I definitely have lists, things that I jot down. I'm also very tactile. I do want to write things down, to a certain extent. So I'll write certain things down and carry that around as well. But having a calendar and keeping it up to date, it's good. It allows you to say no, because when you're being booked. It's a bummer when we get double or triple booked. Why? Because I didn't have my calendar up to date. Colleague threw something on it, or I forgot that I had something, a doctor's appointment. And I'm like, yeah, sure, no problem. And then I realize, and then so you're double booked. And then that, again, it's not only an inconvenience, it's a time waster to be double booked, because then you have to deal with that whole thing. Also leveraging your calendar for those breaks and for fitness, okay, is very, very, I think, a very good use of one's calendar. And then abiding by your calendar, honoring your calendar, treating your calendar, right, with the respect that it should have, right? This is your time. And respecting our own time, our own values, our own goals is where it's at. So very, very important. What kind of other hacks, I guess, or apps do people use to stay organized? Any apps on the phone? I'm going to suggest a few. I'm not sure if you've heard of any of these, but anybody, before I get started, anybody use some cool hacks or cool apps out there? I know I use Evernote just to, when you're searching the internet, you're finding great information. Evernote is a great place to just store, things. I use Google Docs quite a bit, but Evernote I find is really handy to keep kind of all my thoughts, my long-term thoughts and objectives and goals and ideas and creative things, kind of in one spot, Evernote. Okay, Google Drive, of course, Google Drive. There's actually a couple of apps. One is called Off Time. Off Time is an app that helps you balance digital device usage. Okay, so there's Off Time, there's Flipped, Flipd. Okay, and that also helps you manage kind of your time. I guess it's a built-in, kind of calendar and timer. So if you're working on different projects, this might be something that would be beneficial. Freedom is an app and a website blocker for Mac, Windows, Android, iOS, and Chrome. And apparently it's used by over 1 million people to kind of help them regain focus and productivity and focus on what's important. Okay, Freedom. So these are just apps. I'm not selling them. I'm not, but they have been recommended. I've seen them recommended and highly used. App Block is same as Freedom, but for Android. Okay, App Block. So if you find yourself ever getting distracted, maybe by whether it's a news site or a social media channel, or it's like, oh my gosh, let me just check the news, make sure the alerts are turned off. That's what I tell my kids and people around me, just turn off the alerts first and foremost. But if you feel that you may need a little bit of extra guidance, and support in this area and staying focused, right? Especially during work or as you're completing your important things, I would definitely check into some of these apps. Okay. Does anybody have any other app suggestions or hacks to stay focused? Right? Anything on your smartphone? Any ideas? I know I use notes as well on my phone just to have a running list of, various different lists. So no matter where I am, like I have my big goals jotted down so I can stay in that quadrant 2 and keep working within it. Okay, I'm going to wrap up. I know, oh my gosh, yay, we are getting close to the end. The idea is, right, we all want to make the most out of each day. There's a couple of forces going on right now with, the COVID, the pandemic. People are working longer hours. So how can we continue to remain in balance and make time for what's important? I think we're going to have to be very, very tough and disciplined in terms of understanding what our tasks are, what's important, what's not important, and then scheduling accordingly and following that schedule each and every day. And I'm confident if we do, we are going to see incremental, right, improvement and success and achievement in our lives, not just professionally, but with the balance piece as well. Okay. So let's make the most of each day by remembering what's important, handling things just once if they're not important, and making sure to spend time offline, right? So the challenge is not to manage time, but to manage ourselves, according to Stephen Covey. I did want to mention that through the chamber, you do have access to tuition reduction at DeVry and at Keller Graduate School of Management. So that's a really great benefit. If you have any questions about that, we also have some upcoming webinars next week and the week after, effective communication skills and project management for the non-project manager. Would love to see you there. This is my contact information on this screen. If you do have any questions about today, about the education benefits, or about any custom training that we can put together for your organization, I would be happy to hear from you. And at this point, I'm going to pass the baton back to Natalie. Thank you, Natalie, and thank you, audience. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Laura. Another wonderful webinar. Thank you again, Laura. We greatly appreciate DeVry's partnership in this series. And we would like to remind everyone that, as Laura mentioned, this is only 6 out of 8. So we do have 2 more, the next one being next Wednesday at 10 a.m. You can register online on our events page, and we hope to see you there. Thank you again.
Oh my gosh. Thank you, Natalie. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Hope to see you soon.